We have today with us Sergey Nazarov of Chainlink. So Chainlink is one of my personal favorite companies out there right now. Simply said, Chainlink looks to connect the real world to the blockchain by providing on and off ramps for data necessary to run smart contracts. It's a very popular project with a lot of community support. They have a lot of amazing partnerships out there like Google, Oracle startups, and it's one project that I'm certainly keeping an eye on. With that said, I'd like to welcome Sergey onto the show, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
It's great to finally meet you. I've been a personal fan of Chainlink for a long time, and thank you for coming on the interview. Let's jump straight into the questions then.
Thank you.
So let's start off with a very simple question. How did you first come across blockchain and Bitcoin, and what was your first initial reaction?
Yeah, so I got more involved into this around 2011, and I got involved through mining. Back then in 2011, you had a few communities that were relatively small. One of the bigger communities was actually these folks from the gaming community that had GPUs. And I'm actually from the gaming community, so I played multiple MMOs, and you know, when I had time. I don't have time now, but before. And basically, there were all these people making videos about this thing you could do with your GPU. So I found out about it that way, and I initially thought it was related to some kind of digital currency of some kind related to gaming. And then, as I started looking deeper and deeper into it, I basically realized that it's something very different from other digital currencies. I actually knew something about the history of digital currencies, and I knew that the recurrent problem there was that a lot of the times the companies that make the currency for loyalty points, like there was this thing called Beans, and there was, the 90s, there were a whole bunch of digital currency startups in the 90s. Most people don't know about it now, but their problem was that people would aggregate value into these digital currencies for loyalty points or for whatever value. They would go out of business. And then basically one of the first things that triggered it for me was that there was this thing that wasn't run by a company. And that, I didn't really understand how that worked, but I knew it was completely new. And I knew that solved a very serious problem with digital currencies, because if you could have faith in a digital good or a currency or some kind of store of value perpetually existing, irrespective of a company's ability to function, I at the very least knew that that was new, and that avoided a failure mode that I knew existed in other digital currencies. The second thing that was very impressive to me when I actually started mining was, as I thought about mining, the fascinating thing is that when you think about all the times in history when you wanted to create something of value, you would basically have a technology and then you would do deals, right? So you would have a flour mill and you would get the wheat and you would mill it into flour and you would sell the flour to bakery, right? So you have technology and you have a collection of deals, right? Now, the fascinating thing for me, and likewise with clothing, like you basically have to do deals. With Bitcoin, the fascinating thing for me with mining was that you basically turn on this machine and it gave you something of value. And I also knew that that never existed. So I didn't really know what that meant. Like, I knew it was probably a big deal. I wasn't sure how legitimate it was, but that's pretty unique. I can't point to a single example where you kind of turn on a machine and it just gives you something of value. So basically, I mined for a number of years because that's all you could do. I didn't. So there's a lot more there, but that's just the answer to your question.
Great. So this was before the industry was like how it is now. Before I go into more about deeper questions about Chainlink. So I like to, when I talk about Chainlink a lot, I do talk to publics pretty often because I'm quite interested, and then I try to explain it to people. I don't come from a technological background. And when I talk to people, the word smart contract always pops up. And a question I commonly get asked by people who may not understand the tech side is, what is a smart contract? And the way I try to explain it is as simply as possible. It's very much like if this triggers this, right? Completely digitized. So I'd like to ask from your point of view, how would you describe it as simply as possible?
I don't know if it should be as simply as possible. I think if I would say as simply as possible, but still relatively accurate, I would say extremely reliable automation. That's what I would say. So what smart contracts do is they automate some kind of contractual outcome, and they do that at a level of reliability that you could rely on that automation for billions of dollars. right? The problem with automation is what you're saying is I'm cutting people out of the loop, and I'm getting efficiency from that. And I mean, that's a great thing, but the reality is a lot of the times people are in the loop to avoid failure scenarios that cost a lot of money. So, I mean, the problem is people don't know those failure scenarios. So they don't really know like why something takes 3 days to clear, or why some of those things happen. They only find out about it when there's a hack, and they're like, "Why didn't you do a better job? You know, why did some bank payment system get hacked?" And they're like, "Oh, well, you know, that's why we have some of these fraud-proof approaches." I think what I would call a smart contract as extremely reliable automation. And the way I initially viewed it when I got into the space was actually extremely reliable automation that knows what happened. So when I got into the space initially, the whole space wasn't actually about tokens. Tokens were not as prevalent a use case. I got into the space on the idea of smart contracts as this extremely reliable automation. But I also had, as part of my definition, that's sort of what your definition is. Your definition is like if this then that. I guess it presumes that the system knows that if this then that occurred, right? So I think, yeah, I think it's important to highlight the difference between digital agreements and smart contracts. Semantically, it's not the best phrasing. Digital agreements are not reliable. Smart contracts are extremely reliable. And then depending on how you want the definition to evolve, you can include that they know things or they don't know things, right? Like when I say know things, like, you know, they know that something happened.
So you mentioned this knowing things, and I mean, we'll get into explaining to the audience how this knowing things occurs. But before that, I'd like to ask you, in the beginning, how did you come up with this idea for Chainlink and smart contracts, how things would work? Was there a certain big event that happened, or did this idea just come to you? Or did you find a flaw in the system somehow?
No, I mean, I think this was an evolution. At first, I was mining, and I knew that that blockchain transactions were just about moving around tokens. And then the initial version of the different idea that arrived to me through the app coins that started appearing in 2013 and 14. These are the first protocols that claim to have anything like a smart contract. But basically, what they were saying is you could use blockchain transactions for other types of data. So one example is some of these transactions had an ability to put a lot of arbitrary message text. So you could just put messages, like messages about where I'm going or what I'm going to eat or where we're going to meet or whatever. And one of the first things we built was called Cryptomail, where we took arbitrary message text and we encrypted it and we put it into a blockchain. And what this did was it proved to be that, well, it did a very, very interesting thing. It made sure that the message text never touched a central server. And this was at a time when a lot of people were working on these email clients that were supposed to somehow, like in some convoluted, crazy set of schemes, provide privacy for messages. And we were basically able to arrive at a system that achieved that result because you can put data other than token movement into this blockchain decentralized infrastructure. So that was very interesting, right? So you're able to solve a technical problem about the privacy of something very critical, message data, message text, with this technology much faster and effectively in a way that you can't with other technologies, right? So that was very interesting. Then I went on to what other data could you put in there? And then we initially went to trading data, and then eventually I arrived at, well, the reality is you could just take every digital agreement and you could formalize it within this system. You could apply the property of extreme reliability and security to every digital agreement. And then the question becomes, what are the digital agreements where that property of extreme reliability and extreme high level of security is useful? And the answer to that is it's the agreements where that property is very valuable. And that has to deal with trust issues and fraud scenarios that are avoided by that agreement being in an infrastructure like this. But that's a more detailed, much more detailed answer than
I understand. No, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are some obvious use cases to me that pop up right away. When you talk about high value and high importance where there's possible fraud, for example, finance or insurance, these are two sectors I could think off the top of my head right away. Before we go into more use cases. I like to expand on hearing more where your ideas of the main use cases are. Can you tell us how does the whole system operate from end to end, from the nodes to the oracles, the smart contracts at the end?
Sure. So our system is built on a few key ideas about how we generate security. The goal of our system is to generate enough security that the connection between a smart contract and an external system that knows that an event occurred. An event could be market price changes, IoT data for insurance, shipping data for trade finance. So our goal, it's just important to understand, our goal is to create what's called an oracle mechanism that provides a very high level of security, ideally the same level of security as a smart contract. It is successfully being achieved now through, at a fundamental level, decentralization. So the thing that secures the smart contract is that its state changes are computed by multiple independent node operators running full replicas. So you have multiple people doing the same computation, and then that state is also stored across these multiple replicas. So that's really what decentralization is. That's what we do. We give people the ability to have multiple oracles, but we give people an informed way to make decisions about who those oracles are and about how they can increase the amount of oracles. Now, those decisions are based on the second key tenet of what we do, which is called binding service agreements. Binding service agreements force an oracle to form a relationship with a user contract, and it forces the oracle to commit to a specific delivery of data over a specific time at a specific level of quality. And what that means is that the oracle is now committing to fulfill the delivery of data, and they have something at stake for that. They have their reputation at stake, and that determines their capacity to get future revenue for similar jobs. They can have cryptocurrency at stake that they can lose as a result of not fulfilling the job. And then the formalization between a user contract and an oracle actually generates a lot of data. So you start to generate a ton of data about how does someone know that an oracle is reliable, right? So that's an important question. So partial answer to that question is, we know that this oracle has delivered this type of data successfully 1 million times. That's one answer. Another answer is, this oracle has been audited by a security auditor 6 months ago. Another answer is, here's identity data that proves the identity of this oracle. An additional answer is, we know that this oracle is running something called the trusted execution environment. So they're running an environment that proves that they've done the computation you asked them, the way you asked them to. This is where our approach does something called defense in depth. And defense in depth is where we layer on top of decentralization, the use of trusted execution environments. Zero knowledge proofs now are in the later stages of implementation, and we're in the early middle stages of looking at homomorphic encryption. So it's the capacity to provide greater degrees of security around an individual node operator, giving people a lot of information to choose a node operator to be their oracle. And then what that all results in is, if you have a market or a smart contract that has an initial value of, let's say, $1,000, and then it grows to 1 million or 10 million, you want the capacity to increase the security of your oracle mechanism in an informed, data-driven manner, and to be able to continue to increase it depending on the value that it secures in that contract. So the goal of the system is really to provide that security, but to also provide it in a very clear, provable way, something we call provable security. That's kind of what we strive for, and to allow people to increase the amount of provable security they have as the value of their contract increases. So both they have assurances, and very importantly, so they can show their user why their contract is secure, which will give their user assurances enough to put their money in such a contract.
I really love your way of explaining, because you while you're talking, I'm thinking of other questions that you haven't answered all along the way, which is great. For example, I was going to ask, how is an oracle penalized if they don't perform the right way? I'm curious, from a statistical standpoint, like I look at it this way, for example, if you're doing an experiment with you got to collect a sample size, right? From a statistical standpoint, the more samples, the more clear the picture. From oracles, is it safe to say logically that the more number of oracles, the better, the safer and more secure the outcome, right? Or is there a certain minimum number you require?
You have to consider how much you value something called Sybil resistance. Sybil resistance is when you have proof that node operators are independent of each other. And this is a feature of node operators that our system takes very seriously. So we actually have two ways right now for node operators to prove identity, which means they can prove a separation between each other. And we're going to have a third and a fourth and more ways for them to prove that. So I think the answer is, it's a question of quality versus quantity. So if you have 10,000 pseudonymous node operators who you don't have any proof that they're actually independent of each other, but there's 10,000 of them. I mean, this is how Sybil resistance is proven in certain systems today, and it seems to meet most people's requirements. It's very costly. There's a lot of them, but you do get certain guarantees. Now the other approach is, if I have 7 node operators that are proven to have successfully delivered data, we know they're provably independent of each other, they're running some kind of trusted execution environment, and they're using zero-knowledge proofs to prove that they're retrieving data from a specific source, it's possible that you need a much smaller number of node operators. But once again, the important thing is the amount of node operators relative to the value they're securing. So if you have a market with, I don't know, $100,000 in it, it's very possible you only need 5 node operators. But if that market grows to $1 million or more, or 10 million, you probably want to go to 7, and then you want to go to more. But the important point is you have to think about, what is that, right? Like, is it 7 people that could all be the same person? Is it 7 independent people with a history of success that are proving they're secure consistently and on an ongoing basis? Well, I think it's this dynamic between quality and quantity, and there's kind of a middle ground.
Understood. So it's really a case-by-case basis, depending what kind of using it for, and find a combination between quantity and quality.
I think that's one of the important things to understand about oracles. Or blockchains, they say, here are my computational capabilities as a scripting language, or here are my opcodes, and I'm going to consistently provide these computational capabilities perpetually. Right? I'm just going to do this forever. I'm going to be here forever. That's basically what they say. Well, oracles don't say that. Oracles and Oracle networks say, most of the time they say, you have a specific contract, your specific contract lasts a year, it needs this data, this level of quality from these sources for that period, and that's what I'm committing to do for you.
So how many node operators and oracles are there right now?
I mean, so it's a large and growing number. I mean, we have a lot of community node operators. We have I think we're approaching, it's like 80 or 90 reviewed node operators, and then there's a subset of those node operators where I think that's at like something like a third of those, maybe 30 are more security reviewed. So we actually have a system where if you prove greater security, you're more valuable to users as node operators. So we don't just have a node operator. We have node operators that prove different levels of security, and then we have node operators that have successfully integrated with specific data sources, right? So as a node operator, you can really succeed on one of those 2 dimensions, or ideally both. You can be integrated with the data sources that users want to consume, or you can payment sources, or you can provide them the services they want as a contract.
Two factors you guys look at node operators right now, or at least what provides value is, one is high-level security, the other is maybe specialization in certain type of data feed, right?
Well, yeah, it's what, I mean, at the end of the day, node operators in our system, they publicly commit to being able to provide data or payments or some kind of service.
Understood.
In the off-chain world.
So these type of specific data feeds could be something like stock prices, for example. Right?
Yeah, that's very common. Crypto prices, very common. There's more and more IoT data, weather data for insurance, some data for gaming.
What's the process to become a node operator and also to become an oracle? Do you go on the website, or what's the process?
I mean, anybody can become a node operator right now. There's a good website in our community called market.link. They have a process to review identity. They have an interesting feature where you can actually prove identity by using something called Keybase. It's easy to become a node operator. I think the question is not just if you're a node operator. The question is, what value do you provide to users in terms of the services you give them access to, and in terms of the security you provide when you give them access to those services?
You're seeking to improve upon these agreements, especially for high importance and high value agreements that can range in the value of tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars. What about smaller scale agreements? For example, let's say even $100,000 or $500,000, because there must be.
That's fine. Even micro transaction level things, even ad network type transactions, in aggregate, those still add up to a lot. It's not just single high value transactions. It's more about the value controlled by the oracle, whether the frequency is very high or the frequency of transactions is low. It's more about the security around an aggregate amount of value.
Can you give us an example of one way that Chainlink's already currently being used from end to end, like a contract that has been executed on already?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting ones. There's a few interesting DeFi ones. Another interesting one where they incentivize users to create map data, and in that case, they used the integration that we did with Google Cloud, where they didn't just use off-chain data, but they actually used some of the computational capabilities of Google Cloud through a Chainlink.
When I look at Chainlink and I think about Chainlink, what Chainlink is doing, I get a feeling that it's sort of, let me know if you agree, it's sort of ahead of its time, because Chainlink has to integrate with the real world in many, many different ways. For example, like AI right now, facial recognition, Internet of Things, it's still very much in development, or almost we can say it's just begun. What use cases do you have in your mind where you think Chainlink might integrate with these other technologies?
I mean, the use cases that are most attractive to me are the ones that provide a lot of what I would call unique value from smart contracts. And that unique value, in my experience, usually takes the form of avoiding some kind of fraud or giving people access to a contract which they didn't have access to before. So, I mean, the things that I'm excited about are things like, crop insurance in emerging markets, using weather data, giving people the ability to have an insurance product that is really one of the oldest, financial contracts out there, which is why a lot of financial markets actually came to be, was for farmers to hedge risk. And there's certain places where people still can't do that because the local legal system can't give them a functioning insurance contract, right?
I agree. I mean, if you like you said, almost every small action is a bigger size deals. They're all really contracts in a way.
So the friction to implementing this has to be much lower than the value gain, and so I think that's where we're going to see the first real adoption is where like these insurance contracts, decentralized financial products for crypto users. Partly because in those cases the friction to use it is actually low. So the decentralized financial product does something very interesting and useful for people, but it appeals to crypto users basically because the friction for them to use it is low because they already have crypto. So I think it's a balance between these usefulness and friction dynamics. But yeah, I think in multiple decades, I don't know why you wouldn't want an additional level of security by having your data somehow secured by blockchain infrastructure, even if it's only if it's periodically hashed and put on chain somewhere.
The reason I asked you that, because I certainly hope that future does become reality one day. I mean, I spent most of my time in Asia, and a big issue is there's a lot of back-end contracts, and then it ends in a very inefficient loss, whether it's lawsuit or going to court. It's a big issue. You mentioned friction, which friction versus value. It kind of leads me to come to my next question. Chainlink's been around for a little bit over 2 years now, right? What do you think has been the biggest challenge to you personally in these 2 years?
Lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep.
No, I mean, what's been my biggest challenge? I mean, personally.
Yeah, personally. Whether it's through work or what's a big obstacle in your mind? what has been a big obstacle in the last 2 years? Or lack of sleep is quite an important one.
I mean, I'm kind of joking about that one. The biggest obstacle, I think there's a lot of obstacles when you're trying to make something useful, especially when it's using a new technology. I think it's very, very hard to say what a biggest obstacle would be. I think it's very important to focus on the security of a product in our space. I think it's very important to work with smart, aligned, kind of correctly, like mentally aligned people that want to see the same kind of change in the world that you want to see. And so I think making a secure product, working with great people, and also making sure that whatever you make gets in the hands of people that find it useful in an efficient way. I would say those three things are pretty challenging. But so.
Let's ask, I want to ask a little bit about the other side. What do you like most about what you do?
What I like most?
Yeah, what do you like most? What do you enjoy most about that? Or maybe we can even just shorten the time from the last 2 years. What's some happy things you're very happy about?
I mean, I feel very lucky. Is the reality. I mean, there's been a large increase in the amount of people that find the work that we're doing worthwhile. Maybe because the space has gotten to the point where what we're doing is worthwhile. I mean, that's I'm very, very appreciative, and I'm very, very grateful to all the people that have supported us, and that do whatever they can do to kind of help our body of work succeed and either become better from a security point of view or get used by users. And so it's been great working with a community of people that that want to see this succeed the same way I want to see it succeed. I think that's a great thing when you have other people that want to see the same change in the world you want to see. I'm very, very grateful for that. That's been a great thing. I think it's exciting for me to see the space go beyond tokenization. I think I've been in this space for a certain amount of time, and that amount of time has led me to kind of see a lot of tokenization, and after a number of years of it, it starts to lose its wonderment, and you start to want the space to be about something more. So I think the exciting thing for me is that I'm slowly starting to see a chicken and eggs problem being solved, right? Where the quality of oracles depends on when people build, and the more people build, the more people have a reason to create more quality oracles. So I think the exciting thing for me is slowly but surely taking the space from just tokens, 90% tokens, 10% other contracts, to slowly, like percentage by percentage point, seeing the space with every additional use case become more about these more advanced, more useful, more complex contracts. Very exciting.
Got it. I think what's great for me to see for you guys is you guys have a huge, really rapidly growing amount of support, not only in the network but also from the community, which is great. That's exciting to see. I'm very grateful for that. I really do feel very lucky that people feel it's worthwhile to work with us, and that this is a valuable problem, and that people want to see the type of world that I've been working towards, and people in my team have been working towards for some time. That's a very great thing. So you talk about the world you're working towards. That leads me to the last question for you. Let's operate under the assumption that this world is a definite certainty. Okay, if you were to just throw out a guess, what year, or how many years from now do you think we'll reach a full adoption where smart contracts, digitizing agreements is not even a wonderment? It's just a normal thing in life.
You mean like the internet today? Is that what you're
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know. That's hard to say. I think things are definitely. I actually really don't know. I'm always very, very bullish on these things. I'm always very optimistic and excited. So I'm not always right about this. I think realistically, the good thing is we have enough runway and we have enough resources to make sure we make great oracles for whenever it happens in the next few years. And I think the recent activity in China and the endorsement by China is going to really accelerate things. Because when that type of endorsement at that level happens, in a place like China, they move extremely quickly after that happens. And so I think that's going to put pressure on everybody else to stop thinking and start doing. And so I see a lot of acceleration in what's going to be getting done basically in this upcoming year. And I've already seen in this past year a lot of things moving forward to actual implementation. So it's very hard to say, and I'm very optimistic about the space, so I can't say that I can accurately predict this. But I would say in the next year or two, I expect to see a lot of things coming into production. And then once their production value gets proved out, people probably copy that at a large scale. And once that copying takes hold, and it effectively allows people to become successful, it allows them to build applications that provide greater value to users, then from that point, it just happens extremely quickly because that's just how technology adoption happens.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think with this, how fast information spreads today, I'm very bullish too, but it could even happen faster than we think, which I hope so.
Yeah, it's extremely hard to predict. That's not really what I'm very good at. I just kind of focus on building good oracles, and I'm very glad that that's going well, and that's what I'm just going to kind of keep focusing on.
All right, well, great. Sergey, thank you for coming on with us. It was great talking to you. I wish we had more time, and we wish you the best. We wish Chainlink the best, and I hope maybe we can talk again soon.
Great, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.